Hello everyone. Let's learn about the concept of scheduling in Linux operating system in this lecture. So we know that in a multi-programming environment, all along we have been learning about the concept of scheduling, and we know that in a multi-programming environment, we are going to have multiple processes residing in the computer's memory at the same time, and they all are going to compete for the CPU. So the task of CPU scheduler is to allocate the CPU to one of those ready to run processes. Okay, so scheduling in Linux also this is the same thing. The scheduling in Linux is the job of allocating the CPU time to different tasks within the operating system. In Linux, we don't use the terms of process or threads. We use the term task to refer to a running program. Okay, so in Linux, scheduling is nothing but the job of allocating the CPU time to the different tasks which is present within the operating system. And in Linux, the tasks can be categorized into two categories, namely user tasks and kernel tasks. Okay, so user tasks are nothing but the tasks which are concerned with the user programs, or when user programs are running, we call it as user tasks. And then we also have another category of tasks called as the kernel tasks. So kernel task may happen in two ways, may happen for two different reasons. One is sometimes tasks may be requested by a running program to the operating system. Any user program, any running program may request for a task to the operating system. That is one reason. The other reason is sometimes code may have to be executed on behalf of a device driver. Okay, one is the running user programs may request the kernel to perform some task, to execute some task. The other one is sometimes there may be a requirement to execute the code internally on behalf of a device driver. Device driver may raise some hardware interrupt, and in order to schedule that hardware, in order to execute that hardware interrupt also, the kernel tasks have to be executed. These are some examples where kernel tasks have to be executed. Kernel tasks are nothing but the tasks which are requested by a user program to the kernel. For example, it may be requested in the form of system calls, or it might be requested during page faults, etc. Or it might be when the hardware raises some interrupt, then on behalf of the device driver, kernel task gets executed. So scheduling has to be done for both these types of tasks, for both user tasks as well as for the kernel tasks. So in this topic of scheduling in Linux OS, we are going to learn about how process scheduling is done in Linux operating system, what is the meaning of symmetric multiprocessing, and how Linux schedulers support symmetric multiprocessing. And then we are going to learn how kernel synchronization is achieved for the scheduling of the kernel tasks. So let's get into the details. The first is about process scheduling in Linux operating system. So Linux basically follows two separate process scheduling algorithms. Why two separate process scheduling algorithms is because it categorizes the tasks into two types. One is the routine time sharing tasks and the other one is the real time tasks. Okay. Routine time sharing tasks may also be called as interactive tasks. We know that an interactive process or an interactive task may spend its time interacting with the user. So because of the interaction, it might be idle for a longer period of time because it might be waiting for a key press from the user, or it might be waiting for the mouse pressing by the user. So it's waiting for some input from the user. So because of that, it might be idle for a greater period of time. So such types of processes will come under time sharing or interactive tasks. So we use the Linux scheduler makes use of a time sharing algorithm which follows fair preemptive scheduling. Okay, fair. What do I mean by fair is, let's say the task is waiting for a longest period of time, then the task may be given priority. So it follows a fair preemptive scheduling for time sharing tasks, and the other one is a priority based scheduling algorithm for real time tasks. Now, what do I mean by real time tasks? Real time tasks are nothing but the tasks which are executed with strict deadlines. It might be the task which is running in a robotic system, or it might be the task which is running in a data acquisition system, etc. They run with strict deadlines, and if it is a hard real time system, then if the deadline is not followed, then the system may even crash. So for such real-time tasks, they should never be preempted by another low priority task under any cost, for any reason. So for that, Linux scheduler follows a priority-based algorithm. Now, another important thing to note is that when Linux was developed initially, starting from its first version till version number 2.5, it followed just a variation of the traditional Unix scheduling algorithm. Okay, only the traditional Unix scheduling algorithm variation was adopted, which is nothing but which is the concept of scheduling, which we learned earlier. The same scheduling algorithm was followed in Linux also, but then it did not provide good support for symmetric multiprocessing. Okay, so symmetric multiprocessing is nothing but we will be having multiple CPUs, multiple processors, which will be sharing the common OS, common memory, common input-output bus. So there will be a single copy of the OS, which will be in charge of all the CPUs. So in the traditional Unix scheduling algorithm, which Linux adopted initially, they didn't provide support for symmetric multiprocessing architecture. And another important thing is, as the number of tasks in the system grew, when the number of tasks in the system became more, it did not provide for good scalability. So for that reason, Linux community decided to come up with a new scheduler exclusively for Linux. And so from Linux version 2.5, they developed a new scheduling algorithm, which is a preemptive priority-based scheduling algorithm. So preemptive, I hope you will be able to remember the meaning of preemptive. Preemptive is nothing but when one task is getting executed, it might be preempted by another task based on the priority. So this type of scheduling algorithm is called O1 scheduling algorithm. Okay, the scheduling algorithm which was followed by Linux from version 2.5 is called as the O1 scheduling algorithm. Now, why it is called as O1 scheduling algorithm is the algorithm claims that it runs in constant time, irrespective of whatever may be the number of tasks in the system. All the tasks will be able to finish their execution in constant time. That's why it is called O1 scheduling algorithm, where 1 means constant. And it also provides increased support for symmetric multiprocessing, load balancing, and support for interactive tasks. So load balancing is nothing but, just now we saw what is symmetric multiprocessing, which is written in short here as SMP. Load balancing means that when you have multiple CPUs in your SMP architecture, load balancing is required. Load balancing is nothing but keeping the workload balanced among all the processors or the CPUs. Okay, let's say you have a project in which 10 people are working together. One person should not be loaded with heavy amount of work, and sorry, 9 people should not be loaded with heavy amount of workload, and one person should not be sitting idle. Similarly, if you have 10 CPUs here, one CPU should not be idle and all the 9 CPUs are having a heavy workload. That should not happen. Then the concept of symmetric multiprocessing will be defeated. So load balancing will try to ensure that there is a uniform workload among all the CPUs or the processors. Okay? And it also provides support for interactive tasks. So let's see how this, so I told you that from Linux version 2.5, O1 scheduler is being used. Let's get into the details of what is that O1 scheduler. Okay, that in O1 scheduling, it is basically, it makes use of a preemptive priority-based scheduling algorithm. Okay, that means tasks will be preempted based on their priorities. But then it makes use of two types of priority ranges. Okay, one is a real-time range starting from 0 to 99, and the other one is called nice value priority range, which ranges from 100 to 140. All these priority ranges from 0 to 99 and 100 to 140 will be mapped to a global priority scheme. Okay, and in Linux scheduler, it follows the convention that low value means high priority. So that means the highest priority will be priority number 0 in this batch. Okay, in the real-time range, 0 will be considered as the task with the highest priority. And similarly, in this nice value range, 100 will be considered as the task with the highest priority. And Linux scheduler will and another important thing is, so here you can see that the priorities from 0 to 99 will be assigned for real-time tasks, and all other tasks, all other routine tasks, routine time-sharing tasks, we call it generally, right? So all that routine time-sharing tasks will be given priorities in the range of 100 to 140. And one more important thing is, real-time tasks will be given a longer value of time quantum so that they are able to complete their execution. So real-time tasks will be given longer value of time quantum, and the routine time sharing tasks will be given a shorter value of time quantum, because they are going to be interactive tasks, and they are going to be idle for some amount of time in which they are going to interact with the user and wait for user input. So from this you can understand that this Linux scheduler has two types of priority ranges. One is a real-time priority range ranging from 0 to 99, and the other one is a nice value priority range ranging from 100 to 140. And the real-time priority range is assigned for real-time tasks, and the nice value priority range is assigned for all other routine time sharing interactive tasks. So this is the concept behind O1 scheduler. Now how the O1 scheduler will ensure that all the processes will complete their execution in constant time, irrespective of how much ever tasks arrive in the system, how will it ensure that they will all complete their execution in constant time with this concept? For that, what is being done is, every processor will maintain a data structure called as run queue data structure. Okay, this run queue data structure maintains a list of all the runnable tasks. But then this run queue data structure maintains a list of all the runnable tasks by using two priority arrays called as active array and expired array. Okay. Active array contains a set of all the list of all the active tasks, and expired array contains a list of all the expired tasks. Now I'll tell you what is the meaning of active task and what is the meaning of expired task. Active task means any task is said to be considered eligible for CPU execution if it has time remaining in its time slice. Let's say if you have a process whose time quantum is 5 milliseconds and it has completed executing with the CPU for 2 milliseconds, it has 3 more milliseconds remaining. Then it's considered as an active task and it will be put in the active array. The other one is the expired array, which contains expired tasks. If a task time of the time slice, if a task's time in the time slice is exhausted, it is completed, then it's said to be a expired task and it will be put in the expired priority array. Okay. Now this is the basic data structure which is used. It's going to, and every processor in a symmetric multiprocessor architecture, we know that we are going to have multiple CPUs or multiple processors, and every processor is going to separately maintain this run queue data structure with these two arrays, namely active and expired arrays. Now, as I told you, active array is going to contain a list of all the active tasks, and expired array is going to contain list of all the expired tasks. Along with this, each of these tasks in the expired array or active array are also priorities are also going to be maintained for all these tasks in the active array as well as in the expired array. Here you can see the active array as well as the expired array, and you can also see the tasks which are organized according to the priorities. Okay, for priority 0, you have 2 tasks in the task list. With priority 1, you have 3 tasks in the task list in the active array. With priority 140, you have 1 task in the task list in the active array. Similarly, for the expired array also, for priority from 0 to 140, you have some set of tasks, list of tasks in the task list. So what will happen is, first, the scheduler will always choose the task with the highest priority from the active array for execution on the CPU. So for execution, obviously it cannot take the expired task from the expired array because its time slice is expired. From the active array only, it has to choose the tasks, and when it has to choose the tasks, it will choose the task with the highest priority from the active array for execution. Okay. And then let's say the active array has become empty. All the tasks have been allocated the CPU and they have exhausted their time quantum, and the active array has become empty. Then what will happen? The active array and the expired array will be exchanged. They will be exchanged, and the expired array becomes active array and the active array becomes expired array. And now these set of tasks in the expired array will be allocated with the CPU, and they will continue their execution with a new set of time quantums. So that is how, with this concept, O1 scheduler ensures that it is able to complete the execution of all the processes in constant time. Because let's say you have a set of expired tasks, they will never be able to get the CPU until all other tasks finish their execution with the time quantum, with the allocated time quantum. Until all the time quantum of all the active tasks in the active array is expired, the expired tasks in the expired array are never going to get that chance. So with this, we are able to ensure that each process gets a uniform share of the CPU and they are able to complete their execution in constant time. So that is how O1 scheduler ensures that a constant runtime is there for all the tasks. So next is about how real-time scheduling happens for in Linux operating system. That means how scheduling of real-time tasks is done. As I already told you, Linux distributions have achieved the official POSIX certification. So according to the POSIX standard, it recommends two scheduling classes for real-time tasks. One is FCFS scheduling and the other one is round-robin scheduling. So real-time tasks will be assigned to one of these scheduling classes. They may be assigned to FCFS scheduling or they may be assigned to round-robin scheduling. Along with that, every real-time task will also be assigned a static priority. Static priority means the priority is not going to change. So then what will happen is the scheduler will always choose the process with the highest priority. So when real-time tasks enter the system, they are going to be assigned to one of these scheduling classes. Along with they are also going to be assigned some priorities, and then the scheduler will choose the process with the highest priority from the scheduling class. And if two processes having equal priority, then the process which has the longest waiting time will be given the priority for execution with the CPU. And as we know already, with FCFS scheduling, it will run once a process in FCFS scheduling has been given the CPU, then it will run until it completes its execution, or it is blocked waiting for input output. Similarly, if a process is assigned to round robin scheduling class, then it's going to be assigned a time share or time quantum, and it will execute till the time quantum expires. So that is about how real-time scheduling happens in the Linux operating system. And another recent addition is from Linux version 2.6. Whatever I told you now about O1 scheduler was followed from Linux version 2.5. From Linux version 2.6, they introduced a new scheduler called as completely fair scheduler, which is called in short as CFS. Now that was merged into Linux from October 2007 with the Linux version called as 2.6.23, and now currently it is the default scheduler for the Linux operating system, and it aims to maximize the overall CPU utilization as well as interactive performance of the system. Next is about the symmetric multiprocessing. So symmetric multiprocessing, as I told you before, it is nothing but the processing of programs by multiple CPUs, which will share a common operating system. Here you can see from the diagram that you have multiple processors, but they are all sharing the common input-output bus. They are all sharing a common main memory, and there will also be a single copy of the operating system, which will be in charge of all these processors. Okay, so Linux 2.0 kernel was the first kernel to support the symmetric multiprocessing architecture. As I already told you previously, prior to that, they followed traditional Unix scheduling, Unix type scheduling, where it didn't provide support for SMP architecture. And from Linux version 2.2, they introduced something called a single kernel spin lock, which is also called as big kernel lock. So generally before that, what happened is that even though you have multiple processors, only one task will be able to execute in kernel mode at any point of time. So in order to avoid that difficulty, from version 2.2 of the kernel, Linux kernel, they introduced this big kernel lock. So with this big kernel lock, multiple processors can run in kernel mode at the same point of time. And then from version 3.0, they also added more processor affinity and more load balancing features. That is, they tried to ensure that the workload is balanced among all the processors, so that one processor does not sit idle while all other processors have heavy workloads. The third is about kernel synchronization. So kernel synchronization is nothing but, as I told you in the beginning, we have two types of tasks. One is user tasks and the other one is kernel tasks. Kernel tasks are nothing but whenever a task is requested by a running program to the operating system, it has to be executed as a kernel task. or whenever a kernel code has to be executed on behalf of a device driver, it is also a type of kernel task. So when a running program requests an operating system service, that may happen due to various reasons. Like for example, through a system call, any user, any running program may request the operating system for some service, or when a page fault occurs. Just try to recall what is page fault, which we learned earlier. Page fault is when the page which the CPU tries to access is not currently there in physical memory, it results in page fault. Now that is not a request by the running program, but implicitly we are calling the operating system. This time also it will be that servicing of the page fault will be handled like a kernel task. And similarly, some device driver may deliver some hardware interrupt. So in that case also, kernel task has to be executed to execute the kernel defined handler for the interrupt. So for all this, we need synchronization. For executing of the kernel tasks, kernel synchronization has to be done. Why? Because now all these are critical tasks. When they are executed, they have to be executed without any interruption by any other task. So we need a framework in which kernel tasks can run without violating the integrity of the shared data. So the data, if there is any shared data, then and when kernel tasks are getting executed, integrity of the shared data should not get affected. So for that, what is the way which we can do? So now you may have a doubt that when kernel tasks are getting executed, they execute in kernel mode, and kernel mode is a privileged mode. When kernel mode gets executed, it should be possible that no other task should be able to interrupt the task in the kernel mode. But then what happened is that after Linux version 2.6, they introduced the concept of preemptive kernel. Before Linux version 2.6, the kernel was not preemptive kernel, which means that if any kernel task is getting executed, it cannot be preempted before Linux version 2.6. But then after Linux version 2.6, they introduced this preemptive kernel. So preemptive kernel means that the Linux kernel, that is a kernel task may be preempted when it is running in the kernel. Okay, preemptive kernel means that a kernel task might be preempted when it is running in the kernel. So because of that reason, now we need synchronization of the kernel task. Otherwise, the data might get inconsistent. So for that, the Linux kernel provides different types of mechanisms. If the Linux kernel supports symmetric multiprocessor architecture, then the mechanism which is followed for locking the kernel is spin locks and semaphores. Okay, whenever the kernel task has to be executed in a symmetric multiprocessor architecture, it will acquire the spin lock, then the kernel task gets executed, and then it will release the spin lock. Okay, but the spin lock is held only for small durations. But then if it is a single processor architecture, you are going to have only single CPU in your machine, then spin locks are not required. Then what is being done is interrupts will be disabled. When can the kernel be preempted? Only if the interrupts are enabled, then through interrupts only kernel might be preempted, kernel task might be preempted. So to avoid that, whenever a kernel task has to be executed, first interrupts will be disabled, then execute the kernel task, then enable the kernel preemption. Okay, this is the method which is followed in your single processor architecture. In multiprocessor architecture, we use pin locks and semaphores, and in single processor architecture, we use disabling of interrupts and then execute the kernel task, and then we enable the interrupts. So, but then here we have a disadvantage. The disadvantage is that enabling and disabling interrupts is a very expensive task. Also, if interrupts cannot be disabled for a longer period of time, if you disable it for longer time, then system performance may get degraded because some other devices might be waiting for some device input output operation. Then it may have to wait until all these interrupts get enabled again. So we have to avoid disabling of the interrupts for a longer period of time. To achieve this goal, Linux kernel introduces a new synchronization architecture with which your critical task code also will be executed, but interrupts also will not be disabled for the entire duration of the execution of the critical task. Now, how that is being followed or that is being carried out is, see this architecture. For that, Linux follows a different synchronization architecture. In that synchronization architecture, the interrupt service routines are classified into two sections, namely top half and bottom half. Okay, interrupt service routine is classified into top half and bottom half. Top half is a normal interrupt service routine. If the top half interrupt service routine is executed, it will run with interrupts disabled. But when the bottom half interrupt service routine code is executed, it will run with interrupts enabled. Okay. When top half is executed, interrupts will be disabled. But when bottom half is executed, interrupts will be enabled. So when the top half interrupt service routine exits, the bottom half scheduler will be invoked automatically. Okay. So here what happens is that the interrupt service routines and the programs or processes are arranged in order of increasing priority. That means each level may be interrupted by a code running at the higher level. If you have the bottom half interrupt handler, this code might be interrupted by top half interrupt handler, but it can never be interrupted by another bottom half interrupt handler or another code at the lower level. Okay. So in this way, will ensure that when the kernel task is executing with the interrupt service routine at the top half, it's never going to be, it might be interrupted only with another high priority top half interrupt handler. Otherwise, all other interrupts will be disabled. When the interrupt service routine is executed as top half interrupt handler, all other interrupts or any other bottom half interrupt or any other interrupt will be disabled. But it can be interrupted by another high priority top half interrupt handler. If you take bottom half interrupt handler, all interrupts are going to be enabled when this code is executed, but then it can never be interrupted by another bottom half interrupt handler or another interrupt handler at the lower level. Okay. In this way, and also at the bottommost level, you have the user processes. They can always be preempted by another task where if it follows a scheduling algorithm in which involves some time quantum or time sharing. So in this way, you can see that by separating the interrupt service routine into different levels, Linux kernel provides different levels of interrupt protection. At the same time, Linux kernel ensures that interrupts are not disabled for a longer period of time. So that is how kernel synchronization is carried out when kernel tasks are getting executed. So that is all about how scheduling is carried out in Linux operating system. To summarize, we just learned that scheduling is nothing but the task of allocating the CPU to the different tasks within the operating system. And tasks are categorized into two types, namely user tasks and kernel tasks. We learned about how process scheduling, symmetric multiprocessing, and kernel synchronization is carried out. In process scheduling, we saw that it follows two types of process scheduling. That is, routine time sharing tasks are scheduled with fair preemptive scheduling, and real-time tasks are scheduled with preemptive priority-based scheduling. And in Linux version 2.5, they introduced a new type of scheduler called as O1 scheduling algorithm. And in O1 scheduling algorithm, there was two types of priority ranges, namely real-time priority range and nice value priority range. Along with that, Linux scheduler also assigned a bigger value of time quantum for real-time tasks and a smaller value of time quantum for other routine time sharing tasks. And then apart from this, each processor also maintained the run queue data structure with two arrays, namely active array and expired array. The active array contains a list of all the active tasks, that is tasks whose time quantum have not expired, and expired array contains a list of all the expired tasks. So, and after having all these implementations, the scheduler will always choose the task with the highest priority from the active array for execution on the CPU. And for real-time tasks, they were scheduled with allocated with two types of scheduling classes, namely FCFS scheduling and round-robin scheduling. And what happens is, apart from that, every process also had a static priority allocated with them. So scheduler will always choose the process with the highest priority from the set of processes in the scheduling class. And we also learned that in Linux version 2.6, completely fair scheduler was being introduced. And we saw that symmetric multiprocessor architecture is nothing but we are going to have multiple CPUs which all will be sharing common input-output bus, a common main memory, as well as there will be a common single copy of the operating system which will be in charge of all these CPUs. And In Linux version 2.2, they had a single kernel spin lock or big kernel lock, which was created so that many processes can be in the kernel mode at the same point of time. Before this, it was not possible, but then after Linux version 2.2, it was made possible. Then last we saw about how synchronization has to be done for the kernel tasks. Kernel tasks may be executed for different reasons, like because of a program requesting for a system call, or when a page fault occurs, or when a device driver raises a hardware interrupt. And then we saw that kernel synchronization was achieved through spin locks in multiple processor systems and by disabling and enabling the interrupts in single processor systems. And then we also learned that Linux follows a kernel synchronization architecture in which interrupt service routines were separated into top half and bottom half. And the top half routine will always run with interrupts disabled, and the bottom half routine will run with interrupts enabled, but they can never be interrupted by another code of the same priority or a code of the less priority. So with that, we learned that Linux ensures that various levels of interrupt protection is achieved within the kernel whenever kernel tasks are executed within the Linux kernel. So that is all about how scheduling is carried out in the Linux operating system.